The Utah desert sun beat down mercilessly on Dugway Proving Ground, where the air shimmered like a heat haze over baked earth. The acrid sting of gunpowder hung heavy, mixing with the gritty crunch of sand under combat boots, while distant generators hummed like a low, relentless growl. In the midst of this elite U.S. Army rifle test, a cluster of hardened male snipers circled Specialist Riley Harper, thrusting the sleek prototype sniper rifle into her hands with mocking grins. "Just hold it for the real shooter, sweetheart," Sergeant Harlan Eastwood barked, his voice dripping with contempt as he labeled her a quota filler, drawing crude laughs from his cronies. Riley's fingers tightened around the cold metal stock, her steady green eyes betraying nothing of the fire burning inside. Years of Montana backcountry hunts with her late father sharpening her into something they couldn't yet see. But in that moment of dismissal, a quiet storm brewed, one that would soon shatter every assumption in the dust. Inspired by the spirit of those who serve in silence. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from right now? Riley Harper stood apart from the cluster of snipers, her slight build casting a modest shadow on the sun-baked Utah sand. At 26 years old, this U.S. Army specialist carried herself with a quiet demeanor that blended into the background, her unassuming ponytail swaying slightly in the dry breeze. Born and raised in the rugged hills of Montana, she had enlisted straight out of high school, driven by a pull she couldn't quite name at the time. Her current assignment at Dugway Proving Ground felt like a half measure, relegated to observer status in the Advanced Sniper program. Gender biases ran deep in these elite circles, whispers of favoritism blocking her from full participation despite her impeccable quals. Riley felt the weight of it daily, but she kept her head down, letting her actions simmer beneath the surface. The men's eyes flicked over her, dismissing the slender frame that didn't scream combat-hardened warrior. Rumors swirled like the desert dust calls of her being soft, and affirmative action hire pushed through to meet quotas. They didn't see the steel in her spine, forged from nights alone in the Montana wilderness. Riley's steady gaze swept the horizon, a habit ingrained from years of scanning for threats that weren't always visible. It was a subtle cue, one that hinted at layers beneath her calm exterior. A faint scar traced her temple, a remnant from a training mishap that still triggered echoes of PTSD in quiet moments. Deep inside, Riley harbored a fire that no one here suspected. Her motivation ran bone deep to honor her father, Everett Bradley, the Gulf War sniper who had shaped her world. He had taught her everything from the cradle of their Montana ranch before service-related illness claimed him too soon. Flashbacks hit her like cold winds off the Rockies. She remembered huddling in a deer blind at dawn, fingers freezing on the trigger of her first rifle, the scent of pine sap thick in the air. Everett's gravelly voice would cut through the chill. "Outthink the wind, Riley. It's smarter than any man you'll meet." Those lessons stuck, turning hunts into survival drills. The echo of shots would ring out across the valleys, each one a bond between father and daughter. Now, with him gone, Riley carried that legacy like a loaded chamber, ready to fire when the moment called. Back at Dugway, the underestimation gnawed at her, but she turned it into fuel. Peers muttered doubts behind her back, one burly corporal leaning into another. What's she even doing here? Probably can't handle the recoil. Riley overheard, her jaw tightening, but she didn't snap back. Confrontation wasn't her style. Instead, she plotted with quiet smarts, observing every test fire, every miscalculation. Her internal resolve hardened. Prove it through action, not words. Let them see what Montana grit really meant. The program briefings were the worst, where instructors like Sergeant Harlan Eastwood would glance her way with thinly veiled scorn. "Observer only, Harper. No touching the gear unless told," he'd say, his tone laced with dismissal. Riley nodded, but inside, she cataloged his errors, waiting for the crack in their armor. Memories flooded again, pulling her back to a stormy Montana evening. Everett had dragged her out in the rain, mud slick under their boots, the metallic tang of wet earth mixing with gun oil. "Feel the shift in the air, kid. Outthink it before it outthinks you," he'd grumble, his hand steady despite the tremors starting to show from his illness. That illness had come slow, a shadow from his Desert Storm days, Agent Orange whispers turning into full-blown battles. Riley had watched him fade, his once powerful frame wasting away in a VA hospital bed. His last words to her, "Don't let them box you in, Riley. Shoot through the barriers." Now, at Dugway, those words echoed louder than any range command. The biases here mirrored the ones Everett had warned her about, old-school mindsets clinging to the ranks. But Riley's hidden confidence grew from that PTSD-tinged past, turning trauma into precision. Whispers followed her to the mess hall, where a group of specialists clustered over MREs. "Heard she's just here for the optics?" "Affirmative action poster girl," one sneered, not bothering to lower his voice. Riley sat alone at a corner table, fork pausing mid-bite, her green eyes flicking up with that unyielding scan. She didn't rise to it, choosing strategy over outburst. Internally, she mapped her path, used the observer role to learn their weaknesses, then strike with undeniable skill. It was how Everett had survived the gulf, outsmarting the chaos. Another flashback gripped her. A crisp autumn hunt, leaves crunching underfoot, the sharp crack of her shot felling a buck at 800 yards. Everett's proud slap on her back, his cough already hinting at the end. "That's my girl." Wind didn't stand a chance. The scent of fallen pine needles lingered in her mind, grounding her amid the desert's alien dryness. Here at Dugway, with its endless sand and tech-heavy tests, Riley felt the disconnect, but also the opportunity. Her slight build hid a resilience they couldn't fathom. Piers tested her subtly, one handing her a spotting scope with a smirk. "Think you can even focus that thing?" Riley took it without a word, her fingers adjusting the dial with expert ease. They didn't notice the precision, too busy with their own egos. Her plan coalesced in quiet moments, staring at the prototype rifle from afar. Prove worth through action. Outthink them all, just like the wind. It was her agency, her drive, pushing beyond the biases. The PTSD echoes came at night, in the barracks' dim light, sudden noises pulling her back to training accidents. But she channeled it, turning flinches into focus. Everett's legacy demanded no less. Montana roots ran deep, those cold hunts building not just skill, but character. Freezing fingers on triggers taught patience. Pine scents reminded her of home's unyielding lessons. Now, in the U.S. Army's elite shadows, Riley Harper was ready to emerge. Doubts from peers piled on, but she let them fuel her internal fire. Soft, they called her, yet her steady gaze held horizons they couldn't reach. It was time to show them the storm within. Secondary interactions sharpened the edge. A technician, Dr. Technician, Doctor. Tatum Winters nodded her way once, sensing something more, but the whispers dominated, testing her resolve. Riley planned silently, her smarts her sharpest weapon. Honoring Everett meant more than marksmanship. It was about breaking through, proving a woman could outsmart the system. In the advanced program's fringes, she waited, ponytail tucked under her cap, eyes on the prize. Action would speak volumes. The sun climbed higher over Dugway Proving Ground, turning the test site into a furnace where every breath tasted of dry dust and desperation. Sergeant Harlan Eastwood positioned himself at the firing line, the MK-30 prototype sniper rifle cradled in his beefy arms like a trophy. The group of 12 specialists and technicians watched, their sweat-soaked uniforms clinging to skin, the metallic tang of overheating gear sharp in the air. Eastwood fired the first round at 1,000 meters, the crack echoing across the barren flats. The target pinged confirmation, a clean hit. But Riley Harper, standing off to the side with the spare bipod in her hands, noted the subtle waver in the scope's readout, a hint of thermal mirage already creeping in. As distances increased to 1,500 meters, Eastwood's shots began to stray. The desert heat warped the air, creating shimmering waves that fooled the rifle's auto-compensators. He cursed under his breath, wiping sweat from his brow, his voice gravelly with frustration. Riley felt the stares, the unspoken judgment lingering like the heat. She shifted her weight, the gritty sand grinding under her boots. Internally, she calculated the uncompensated variables, the wind's subtle curl off the distant ridges, ignored by the tech. Eastwood thrust the rifle toward her during a reload break. "Hold it steady, princess. Don't chip a nail while the men work." His cronies barked laughs, but a couple exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the edge in his tone. Riley took the weapon without a word, her fingers tracing the cool barrel. The weight felt familiar, like an old friend from Montana hunts. But she endured the mockery, her cheeks burning with humiliation, resolve hardening like steel in a forge. The tests pushed to 2,000 meters, where the thermal mirages turned vicious. Eastwood's next shot missed wide, kicking up dust far left of the target. He slammed a fist on the sandbag rest, his face reddening under the cap. "Damn this heat," he growled, adjusting the scope with jerky movements. The technicians hovered, murmuring about recalibrations. Riley watched silently, her mind mapping the air currents, the way heat rose in spirals, bending light like a predator's camouflage. One crony, a lanky corporal named Diaz, snickered. Maybe the quota girl's got ideas, hand her the manual. Laughter rippled again, but fainter this time, a few heads turning away. Riley's internal fire flickered. She wouldn't rise yet, not until the moment demanded it. Eastwood snatched the rifle back, his grip rough. "Observers observe, Harper. Stick to fetching water." He fired again, another miss, the report fading into the endless desert quiet. Tension coiled tighter as failures mounted. The group dynamics shifted. Cronies' laughs turned to mutters, uneasy glances multiplying like shadows at dusk. Riley's agency simmered beneath her calm. She outsmarted their reliance on the MK-30's tech by noting the overlooked barometric pressure drops, Earth's subtle spin at this latitude. What would you have done in that moment, facing down the stairs, the heat pressing like a vice? Riley breathed steady, her ponytail damp with sweat. She waited, humiliation fueling her focus, resolve whispering that her time would come. At 2,200 meters, Eastwood's confidence cracked wide open. His shot veered high, the computer's compensation fighting the mirage instead of fixing it. He stood, rifle slung low, barking at the tech lead for adjustments. Dr. Tordmeis. Tatum Winters, the civilian engineer, scribbled notes, his pen scratching like an accusation. "Environmental factors are exceeding parameters," he said flatly. The crowd's unease grew palpable, shoulders slumping in the relentless sun. Riley's internals churned, burning cheeks from the barbs, but a focused resolve to endure. She scanned the wind flags fluttering erratically, calculating shifts the others missed. "Outthink them," her father's voice echoed, turning prejudice into her edge. Eastwood rounded on her again, varied in his venom. "What's that look, Harper? Think you could do better with your backcountry plinking?" His words stung like sand in the eyes, drawing a fresh round of chuckles from the diehards. But now more exchanged uneasy glances, the laughter hollow. One technician averted his eyes, fiddling with a tablet. Riley held her tongue, her mind a whirlwind of ballistic arcs, uncompensated for the thermal layers stacking like invisible walls. The next attempt at 2,500 meters sealed the pattern. Eastwood prone, breath held, trigger squeeze, and miss. The target stood mocking, intact under the haze. Curses flew. Eastwood rising with veins bulging. This prototype's junk mirages screwing the optics. The metallic tang of hot metal intensified, uniforms drenched, the group's morale dipping like the sun toward horizon. Riley's humiliation peaked internally, cheeks aflame, but she channeled it into resolve. She noted the spiraling thermals, a pattern repeating every 40 seconds unseen by the tech, but clear to her trained eye. Her agency shone in silence, outsmart the system, wait for the fracture. Group reactions turned gradual unease into open murmurs. "We're burning daylight," Diaz muttered. No laugh now. Others shifted feet, the crowd's confidence eroding like the sand underfoot. "What would you have done, pinned by those judging eyes, the desert's breath hot on your neck?" Riley stood firm, her steady gaze cutting through the haze. She planned her move, smarts over spectacle. Pushing to 2,800 meters, the ultimate test, Eastwood's failures cascaded. Shot after shot veered, the MK-30's advanced features buckling under the mirages. He adjusted frantically, sweat dripping onto the stock. The technicians clustered, voices low with concern. "We need manual overrides," Winters suggested timidly. Eastwood waved him off, ego blinding him to the obvious. Riley endured another jab. "Harper, you're good at holding, maybe cradle the ego next." Varied mockery, but the crony's responses thinned, uneasy glances dominating. Her internals balanced humiliation with unyielding focus, calculations racing. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, the group's dynamics fractured fully. Laughter died, replaced by frustrated sighs. Riley's resolve peaked. She'd wait no longer if the window opened. Multiple misses piled up, tension thick as the heat. Reflective pause. What would you have done, outgunned by bias, yet armed with hidden skill? Riley's agency emerged in subtle notes, outsmarting the tech's flaws with environmental reads. Crowd reactions crested in unease, heads shaking as Eastwood fired yet another errant round. The distant hum of generators mocked their efforts. Riley's cheeks burned, but her moment loomed, resolve like a loaded round. Eastwood handed off the rifle for a cooldown, his hands slick. "Harper, hold this. Don't pretend you know ballistics." The jab landed, but Riley took it, fingers sensing the balance, mind already compensating for variables. Internally, she mapped the wind shifts, thermals spiraling in predictable chaos. Humiliation fueled her, but focus won. She outthought their reliance on gadgets, noting humidity's subtle drag. Group unease mounted, technicians whispering alternatives. One crony broke rank with a hesitant glance her way. Dynamics shifted, doubt in Eastwood, curiosity toward the quiet observer. "What would you have done? Silence your armor, stares your enemy." Riley breathed deep, the scent of gun oil grounding her. Her agency whispered, "Strike soon." As Tess neared collapse, Eastwood's final shot at 2,850 meters whistled wide. He stood defeated, cursing the mirages. The crowd fell silent, unease thick. Riley's internals roared, humiliation's burn met with iron resolve. She'd calculated every uncompensated factor, ready to act. The moment hung, pregnant with change. Riley Harper's hand brushed the MK-30 stock as she held it during the cooldown, her thumb tracing a faded scar along her palm. The mark came from a childhood misfire in Montana, a lesson in respect for the weapon that still stung in memory. She flexed her finger subtly, feeling the old ache, a quiet reminder of trials survived. The group milled about, frustration thick as the arid air drying throats. Swirling dust devils danced in the distance, twisting visual distortions that warped the horizon like a bad dream. Riley's quiet confidence stood out, her posture unmoved amid the men's grumbling curses. One peer, Diaz, caught her licking a finger to test the wind, raising an eyebrow. "Quirky habit, Harper, like you're dowsing for water out here." He chuckled, dismissing it as some backcountry oddity, unaware of the precision it signaled. Internally, Riley plotted adjustments, her mind racing through wind vectors and thermal layers. She wouldn't reveal her hand yet, keeping the mystery wrapped tight. The scar on her palm itched, pulling her back to Everett's voice. "Feel the air, kid. It's got secrets." Ambient heat pressed down, the dry throat sensation making every swallow a reminder of the desert's cruelty. Dust devils spun closer, their visual haze bending light, mirroring the group's growing confusion. Riley's eyes narrowed, hinting at deeper skill without a word spoken. She adjusted the rifle's balance with a quick gesture, shifting it effortlessly in her grip. Eastwood glanced over, scowling, but said nothing, too wrapped in his own failures. The move was expert, born of countless hours, yet it passed as accidental poise. Memory surged. Everett Bradley, Gulf War shadows in his eyes, lecturing on the Coriolis effect at this very latitude. Earth spin pulls your shot right out, think it, or miss by miles. Riley internalized it, plotting without disclosure, her quiet confidence, a veil over expertise. Peers whispered, frustration mounting as the MK-30 cooled. One technician eyed her oddly, sensing something off in her calm. But they dismissed it, chalking her steadiness to luck or indifference. Riley's internals churned with suspense, the arid air scratching her throat like unspoken truths. She watched a dust devil collapse, visual distortion fading, much like the group's assumptions might soon. Her scar throbbed faintly, a clue to battles unseen. Licking her finger again, she confirmed the wind's shift, a northwest gust curling subtly. Diaz snorted. Quirky as hell, next she'll read tea leaves. The mystery held, her plotting adjustments, mental blueprints for the uncompensated chaos. Quiet confidence radiated from her, contrasting the men's sweat-slicked agitation. Ambient details amplified the build, generators humming low, dry winds whispering secrets only she heard. Hints of skill danced just out of reach, teasing without confirmation. The faded scar caught the light as she handed the rifle back, a subtle foreshadow of resilience. Everett's lessons echoed, Coriolis at play, latitude demanding respect. She kept it internal, mystery intact. Swirling dust devils were formed, their twists pulling eyes away, throats parched from the heat. Riley's gaze pierced through, plotting the rifle's next dance with the elements. Deeper skill lurked, unspoken, building the tension coil. Peers spotted her gesture, another quick balance check on a spotting scope. Acting like she knows, one muttered, dismissing it. Internal thoughts revealed her strategy. Adjust for thermals, outthink the mirage, background veiled. Suspense thickened with each ambient whisper, dry air coating tongues, visual distortions playing tricks. Riley's confidence shone quietly, a contrast to frustration's roar. Hints accumulated, skills shadow lengthening without full light. Memory of the childhood misfire flashed, the rifle bucking wild, scar blooming hot. Learn from it, Everett had said, turning pain to precision. Now, at Dugway, it foreshadowed her edge, mystery deepening. Licking her finger once more, wind test complete, she noted the Pierce quirk label with internal amusement. Plotting continued. Coriolis compensation, latitudes pull adjustments ready, full background hidden. Dust devils swirled anew, ambient chaos mirroring the group's unrest, throats raw from arid blasts. Riley stood apart, quiet confidence, a beacon amid storm. Deeper skill hinted, suspense hanging like heat haze. The scar on her hand seemed to pulse with the desert's rhythm, a subtle clue to expertise forged in fire. Quick gestures accumulated, rifle balances instinctive. Mystery kept peers guessing, frustration their only certainty. Internal monologue raced, outthink the wind, the men, the tech. Everett's mantra alive. Latitude's Coriolis whispered corrections, plotting without reveal. Suspense built, her confidence the quiet storm's eye. Ambient details pressed, visual distortions from dust, dry throats begging relief. Peers dismissed her wind test as quirky folly, yet hints of skill persisted, contrasting their growing despair. Riley's faded scar caught her eye again, childhood misfire's legacy. It foreshadowed resilience, expertise bubbling under. Mystery held firm, suspense coiling tighter. Quick gesture, adjusting a strap with shooter's precision. Peers overlooked it, frustration blinding them. Internal plotting surged, adjustments for unseen variables, background shadowed. Memory anchored her, Everett on Coriolis, latitude's invisible hand. Factor it, or fail, he drilled. Now, hints dropped subtly, skill's depth unconfirmed. Swirling dust devils dominated the view, visual tricks amplifying suspense. Dry air-clawed throats, ambient pressure mounting. Riley's quiet confidence stood resolute, deeper skills promise unspoken. Licking her finger, wind confirmed, quirky label sticking. Peers chuckled faintly, mystery thriving. Internal thoughts, plot the shot, outsmart the haze, full reveal pending. The group's frustration peaked, contrast sharp as Riley's gaze. Hints accumulated like sand grains, skills outline emerging. Suspense hummed, ambient whispers urging the turn. Faded scar, quick gestures, Coriolis echoes, all foreshadowed subtly. Mystery enveloped her, peers blind to the storm. Build complete, confidence quiet but unyielding. The team began folding gear, the test declared a failure for the day. Eastwood yanked off his shooting gloves and tossed them onto the sandbag with a dismissive snap. "Pack it up," he barked, the defeat in his voice wrapped in a thin skin of authority. Riley stood still, the MK-30 cooling in her hands. The weight of the moment pressed against her ribs like a held breath. She looked down the range, 2,850 meters of shimmering, invisible resistance, and something in her chest made a decision before her mouth did. "Captain Grant." Her voice came quiet and steady, cutting through the noise of packing equipment. "I'd like to request one shot." Landon Grant, the lean, dark-eyed captain overseeing the day's evaluation, turned with a raised brow. He had said little all afternoon, but his eyes had missed nothing. He studied her for a beat, the desert wind tugging at the brim of his cap. Eastwood spun around, his face already flushing. "You have got to be kidding me. She's an observer. She doesn't touch the MK-30 for live fire. That's protocol." His voice rose, attracting the tired eyes of the group. Captain Grant didn't look at Eastwood, he looked at Dr. Five. Tatum Winters, who paused mid-annotation on his clipboard. Winters tilted his head slightly, the look of a scientist who had spotted an interesting variable. "Additional data wouldn't hurt," Winters said simply, his pen hovering. "Even a miss tells us something about the platform's manual operation." Grant studied Riley one more moment. He saw the stillness in her, No plea, no desperation, just the flat calm of someone who already knew what was about to happen. He nodded once. "One round, Harper." "For data." Eastwood's jaw tightened. "This is a waste of—" "Stand down, Sergeant." Grant's tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. Riley moved to the firing line without ceremony. She settled behind the rifle with a natural ease that silenced a few murmurs before they started. Her cheek found the stock like it had done it 1,000 times in the cold dark of the Montana backcountry. Because it had. She surveyed the range. The thermals were cycling. She had been watching them all afternoon without anyone noticing. Every 42 seconds, the heat spirals rose in a predictable rotation off the hardpan, twisting left before releasing. The Mk-30's auto-compensator had been fighting those spirals as if they were random. They were not random. Her father's voice drifted in, low and certain. "Outthink the wind, kid." It's got a rhythm. Everything does. She reached for the auto-compensator toggle and switched it off. A sharp exhale from someone behind her. She ignored it. "What is she doing?" Diaz breathed, to no one in particular. Riley made her manual adjustments, small, deliberate, nothing dramatic. She accounted for the spiral interval, the Coriolis pull at this latitude, the humidity drop that had occurred in the last hour as the temperature peaked. She accounted for the faint crosswind from the northwest that had been ticking up by half a knot every 15 minutes. The others had not noticed. She had noted it during Section 2 of the morning's drills, when she was supposed to be fetching water. She settled her breathing into the box pattern Everett had drilled into her. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold. 4 counts out, 4 counts hold. The world narrowed to a long, clean corridor of focus. The group had gone completely quiet behind her. Even Eastwood. Riley exhaled to the natural pause between heartbeats, that half-second valley of stillness that every real shooter lives in, and she squeezed the trigger. The crack of the Mk-30 was enormous in the desert silence. The recoil pushed through her shoulder in a familiar, honest shove. She stayed on target through the scope, watching the distant shimmer. 2.5 seconds of silence stretched like an hour. Then the target, a hardened steel plate the size of a man's torso, disintegrated, not clipped, not winged. Center mass, total destruction, a puff of debris punching outward in the afternoon haze. Nobody moved. Dr. Tarkter. Winters stared at his monitor, then at his monitor again. His pen had stopped moving entirely. He pressed his earpiece and spoke to the downrange observer team in a voice that had lost all its clinical flatness. "Confirm impact location." The reply came through the speaker mounted on the support table. Everyone in the group heard it clearly in the total silence. "Center. First round. No correction required." The words landed like a second shot. Diaz turned slowly to look at Eastwood. Eastwood was standing with both hands at his sides, the color draining from his face in stages, like sand falling through a cracked hourglass. His mouth opened and nothing useful came out. Riley rose from the prone position with the same unhurried calm she had taken to the firing line. She cleared the chamber, set the safety, and placed the Mk-30 carefully on the rest. She did not smile. She did not look at Eastwood. Winters crossed to her in 4 long strides, his clipboard pressed to his chest. "How did you account for the thermal spiral?" He was already in scientist mode, pen reactivated, eyes alert. The auto-compensator's algorithm had no pattern model for that cycle. "It wasn't random," Riley said. 42-second rotation. It breaks left before it releases. You can see it in the light bend if you watch long enough. She paused. I watched all afternoon. Winters blinked twice. Behind him, 2 other technicians leaned in, listening. Captain Grant stepped forward. He stood in front of her and said nothing for a moment, his dark eyes steady. Then he turned to the group with a measured voice that carried authority without theater. "Someone document the manual adjustment parameters Harper used. All of them." He looked at Winters. Cross-reference against the auto-compensator's failure points. "I want that analysis before 1700 hours. The group broke into motion, but it was a different kind of motion than before. Not the busy work of frustration, the focused urgency of people who had just witnessed something they needed to understand. Eastwood had not moved. He stood at the edge of the activity like a man watching a building he had always owned quietly change its locks. His cronies had dispersed into the technicians' cluster, suddenly invested in clipboards and data tablets. Nobody was laughing. Riley retrieved her cap from the sandbag rest and put it on with quiet precision. The scar on her palm caught the last angle of afternoon light. She had done what she came to do. The rest was just paperwork. What would you have done in that silence, standing where she stood, the desert holding its breath around you? Riley Harper had not needed to raise her voice once. She had simply read what others refused to see and let 2.5 seconds of physics say everything worth saying. Eastwood's denial came low and tight, barely above a mutter. Lucky red, wind shift. It won't replicate. But his voice had no audience left. The group had already moved on. The desert sun dropped another degree. The generators hummed on. And 2,850 meters down a Utah hardpan, the wreckage of a steel target lay flat in the dust, evidence that could not be argued with, adjusted, or taken back. The following morning brought a black government vehicle to the edge of the test line, dust curling from its tires as it stopped with quiet authority. The door opened, and Colonel Harlan Vance stepped out, Director of Advanced Precision Programs, a man whose posture had been built by 30 years of carrying weight. He did not greet the group first. He walked directly to the range monitor station, where Winters had the footage pulled up and frozen on the moment of impact. Vance leaned in and studied it for a long time without speaking. His jaw moved once, like a man doing math in his head. Then he pulled up Riley's personnel file on the adjacent tablet. His eyes moved between the screen and the still frame with measured deliberation. He found the name in her record, Everett Bradley. And something shifted in the hard geography of his face. Not softness. Recognition. He had served alongside Everett Bradley in Desert Storm. He remembered a shot, 1,100 meters, crosswind, a situation that should have been statistically impossible. Bradley had made it look routine. Vance straightened and turned to face the assembled group. The silence that followed was the kind that earns its silence. Not the silence of nothing happening, the silence of everyone suddenly understanding that something had already happened, and they were only now catching up. Eastwood stood to the left, arms crossed, posture still defensive. But his eyes were watching Vance with the careful attention of a man who understood rank and consequence. The cronies had stopped pretending to be busy. Vance's gaze found Riley Harper standing at ease near the equipment table. He looked at her the way a man looks at something that confirms a long-held belief. There was no surprise in his eyes, only the quiet weight of verification. "You're Everett Bradley's daughter," he said. It was not a question. Riley met his gaze directly. "Yes, sir." A beat of absolute stillness passed through the group. Shoulders straightened. Chests rose with careful, held breaths. Diaz looked at the ground. Two technicians exchanged a glance that carried a full conversation in half a second. Eastwood's arms dropped from their crossed position and hung at his sides. The color had not returned to his face. Vance gave a single, slow nod. Then he looked at Captain Grant. "My office." "Ugh, 1 hour. Bring her." The conference room at Dugway's operations building was spare and functional. A folding table, 4 chairs, a wall-mounted screen still showing the range footage on loop. Colonel Vance sat at the head with Captain Grant to his left. Riley took the chair across from them with the composed posture of someone who understood that moments like this required presence, not performance. Dr. Time. Tatum Winters had been invited as a technical witness. He sat in the corner with his clipboard, though he had barely written anything. He was too busy listening. Vance laid both hands flat on the table. "We watched that footage 4 times this morning, Specialist Harper. The adjustments you made, manual, unaided, on a platform you've never fired in a controlled setting before, were correct down to the variable. Every single one." Riley said nothing. She let him finish. "Your father used to say that a real shooter doesn't fight the environment. He reads it, then moves with it." Vance's voice was measured, deliberate. "He was right, and so were you." Captain Grant leaned forward. "You've honored the uniform, Harper." His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a man who did not offer that sentence casually. The door opened without a knock. Eastwood stepped in, his face tight, a prepared objection already forming on his lips. Sir, with respect, protocol was broken. The observer designation exists for a reason, and if we start bending… Sergeant. Vance did not raise his voice. He simply said the word the way a door closes. Captain Grant authorized the shot. That is his authority and his call. And I have now reviewed the footage of your conduct during yesterday's evaluation. A pause that Eastwood felt in his spine. You will report to the command adjutant at 0800 tomorrow for a formal review of your behavior toward a fellow soldier. That is not a request. Eastwood's prepared argument turned to chalk in his mouth. He stood there for one long second, then turned and left without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. Winters exhaled quietly in the corner. Vance turned back to Riley. There is a slot opening on the Precision Development Team attached to the U.S. Army Marksmanship Unit at Fort Benning. It is not a posting you apply for. It is one you get offered when someone at my level decides the Army needs you there more than it needs you anywhere else. He slid a folder across the table. I am offering it to you now. Riley looked at the folder. Inside it was a transfer order, already signed. She thought of Everett Bradley, standing in the Montana rain with his arms steady and his cough hidden, telling her to shoot through the barriers. She picked up the folder. When do I report? Monday, Vance said. She nodded once. No celebration. No visible emotion beyond the quiet, composed acknowledgement of a woman who had known this moment was coming and had simply waited for everyone else to catch up. Winters spoke for the first time since entering the room. His voice was uncharacteristically soft. For the record, Specialist, your read on the thermal spiral cycle was more accurate than our instrumentation. I want to include your methodology in the platform's updated manual, if you'll allow it. Riley looked at him steadily. It was my father's methodology. Put his name in it. Winters wrote it down without hesitation. Outside the window, the Utah desert shimmered on, unchanged, indifferent, and vast. But inside that spare conference room, something had permanently shifted. The week that followed moved quickly, the way time does when a chapter closes and a new one opens before the ink is dry. Riley packed her gear in the Dugway barracks with the same efficiency she brought to everything. No ceremony, no lingering over what the place had tried to make her feel. Diaz stopped her in the corridor on her last morning. He stood with his hands loose at his sides, no swagger left in his posture. For what it's worth, he said, and then stopped, like the rest of the sentence was harder than he expected. Your father was a legend. I didn't know. Riley looked at him evenly. Now you do. She walked past him and into the dry Utah morning. On the drive to the airfield, she let herself think about Everett. Not the hospital version, the Montana version. The man who stood knee-deep in a creek in October and pointed to the shimmer on the water's surface and said, "That's the wind writing its name. Learn to read it." She had learned. And she had carried it here, into a desert on the other side of the country, and it had been enough. The lesson was not complicated. It never was with Everett. Patience outlasts arrogance. Every time. The men who wrote her off had done so because they looked at what she appeared to be and stopped looking. Riley had never stopped looking. At the wind, at the thermals, at the variables they dismissed as noise. That attention, that refusal to stop reading the world, was the only edge she had ever needed. Prejudice, in the end, is a shooter who stops accounting for conditions. It aims at a fixed point in a moving world and misses. It always misses. Riley Harper had simply stayed steady, let the world move around her, and fired when the moment was right. At Fort Benning, new challenges waited. New ranges, new teammates, new distances, new winds with their own rhythms and secrets. She would read those too. She buckled her seatbelt as the airfield came into view, the tarmac heat bending the air in that familiar shimmer. She allowed herself one quiet thought, directed at no one and everyone at the same time. Sometimes the quietest soldiers carry the loudest legacies. She was ready. Riley Harper did not ask for recognition. She asked for one shot, and she let it speak for itself. That is the Army lesson she carries and the one we carry from her. That real strength does not announce itself. It demonstrates itself quietly and precisely when the moment arrives. If her story moved you, if it reminded you that talent cannot be quantified by appearance and prejudice is always its own worst enemy, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. Every time a story like this reaches someone in a dark or doubting moment, it does exactly what Everett Bradley raised his daughter to do. It shoots through the barriers. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more hidden sniper stories. Every story we share here is a tribute to courage in silence and strength in the shadows. These stories keep the courage alive for generations to come.